Superior Court was upstairs, which is now occupied by the district attorney. That was all the county clerk space up until the mid-1990s. So there's been some shuffling around as space opens up. And, you know, I think that Mr. Munyon, you know, captures some of that. He misses some of that. But I think how we put the jigsaw puzzle back together of what we do in probably the next 5 to 10 years is really going to set the footprint of what county services are going to be like for the next 100 years. Just like 100 years ago, they built the historic courthouse, and it pretty much has defined the space that we, you know, have used. If you look at the history, it wasn't until 1960 that the annex was added to that, and that was to reflect. Up until then, county government was a relatively small operation, but with the advent of the health and social service programs being, you know, fueled by the federal expansion, you know, we found ourselves doing a lot more than what we used to do as an agency, and so that's how these buildings started to be accumulated, and it's been a piecemeal over the years, and you know, we've gotten by over the years, but I think we need to look at how we can do something to be efficient for the next 100 years, and that's really what the goal should be. I think of these discussions, and you can have all the planning documents and all the studies and everything you can put together, but they don't mean anything until they're incorporated into the budget, and that's really the ultimate. And that's how Mr. Bixby represented, you know, the capital improvement program. Is he was very mindful about incorporating it in the budget process, and that's been how we've handled it for the last 15+ years. And maybe some people don't appreciate that, and that's fine. They're entitled to that opinion. Maybe we need to revise the way we do it. Maybe take everything out of the budget and have all the kind of studies and reports. If we're not going to get anything done, maybe that's the thing to do, because all it does is gum up the works in terms of the budget, in terms of allocating resources that aren't being utilized, which I think would be a mistake. But that's how I think we need to proceed, and hopefully we can get some reorganization of our space so we can be more efficient.
Richard, I got a question for you. You made mention a couple of times, you know, maybe financing is a way to do some of this stuff. I mean, so a couple of questions come to mind. Is one, where would we get that financing from? And the second one is how long would it take to get that? And is the interest rates we're going to get, as a county, are they comparable to what they would get at a commercial? As a commercial person?
Much better. Yeah, my initial take on that would be that probably a certificate of participation financing would be the best mechanism to facilitate that, and that's essentially the only way that the county can borrow money without going to a vote of the people. So and this is how we financed the jail when we constructed the jail. There's a third party that's formed where so the county would take its assets, whether that's the improvements that we're building around the courthouse square, and they'd lease that on a long-term lease to a third-party entity, the Lassen County Public Improvement Corporation that we used with the jail. Then they take, on a long-term lease for, say, the duration of the financing, so say that's 30 years. So then that entity pledges that lease as collateral to borrow money from whatever source.
So that third entity would say go to Plymouth Bank and...
Most often it's more of a public issuance of bond, not really. It could be a private placement. Regional banks usually don't participate in that. So technically the county would make a lease payment to the Lassen County Public Improvement Corporation. The Public Improvement Corporation would make a debt payment to whoever they borrow the money from, and that's how the financing works. That's how we did the jail. In the case of the jail, we pledged this building, the courthouse, the annex, and interestingly, not the jail, as the collateral building. In something like this, we would probably pledge the asset that we're building.
What
Is there a note against this building?
Currently, no. Those have been paid off.
Okay.
There was.
Okay.
what would be like your interest rate on something? I mean, just ballpark. I mean, I know it's pretty low right now.
Probably in the, I'm going to guess a 3 to 4%. There are.
And how long does it take to get something like that started in the process?
You know, I think start to finish, from when the decision's made, probably looking at 6 months. There's some value to bundling the projects, because there are some fixed costs associated with those issuances, appraisals and so on. And so, as we get into the financing plan, I think we would look at maybe doing a staggered borrowing where we enter into the agreement now, but maybe we don't borrow all the money initially. We take a draw now, do certain projects later on, get additional funds to do more projects and make payments the whole while. So those are all details that we would have to work out based on what the costs are, what the borrowing needs are, and do we want to invest some of the money that we have on hand, or do we want to borrow it all those questions we would have to answer as we go through the financing plan.
Well, I mean, how soon would we need to start on that? Because if this other bill is coming up in March, I mean, they're not 6 months away, and
Yes, and with that building, what I've discussed with the owners is the possibility of some sort of lease purchase, which would buy us whatever time we need to secure financing for a purchase.
Any questions?
Peter, you have a final project scoring, a method scoring project. Have you done any of that on these?
It's still, we need to do that part of it. That's gonna be another piece of the thing. That's gonna be with the, internally, I think we mentioned it would be the CAO, the Director of Public Works or designated, and the auditor or designated. And from that, it may grow, you know, like I said, we're getting off the ground with this. It may grow that at a certain point, if certain departments have projects or have multiple projects, we may have them score them on priorities amongst themselves, and then give that to us, and then it's gonna compete against the rest of them too, so put a little bit of onus on them. Yeah. But the criteria for scoring, what we wanna use is outlined in here. It's just
Right,
developed-
all
yeah.
outlined.
Yeah.
Where did that come from, other counties?
Yes, I believe that came, maybe Alameda or one of the others. Alameda's got one of the better capital improvement plan out there, but then they also have, I think, $1 billion worth of capital projects in their plan, so of course they're gonna be able to have a big comprehensive plan. Yeah,
That's a little
so,
bit of it.
yeah.
Okay, we'll take public comment now. Just go ahead and state your name.
Okay, Jim Hodge, Susanville. So I read through this capital improvement plan, and I've heard everything you folks said. I agree with a lot of what it is. I don't think it's complete, and I would like to get back kind of to the function of the whole thing, which basically is to kind of have a strategic, some kind of a master plan to this. Earlier, Mr. Hammond asked for energy evaluation of all the buildings, et cetera, but I don't see any energy stuff in here. So I don't know if we're saving money or we're not saving money. The biggest thing that gets to me that has a little bit to do with scoring, I'm not sure if this is the best scoring method or not, but it's priorities. You know, a minute ago, we talked about, well, we won't put roads and bridges on the same plan, so it'll be on a different list. Well, how many lists are there going to be? And then you only have so much money by the budget. Do you spend that on moving from point A to point B, or do you spend that on a bridge, or do you spend it at the airport? And then based upon that, do you spend it at the airport down here, the airport over here, or the airport here? Who gets to decide that? And is there any public input? You know, my idea for this scoring committee might be to have some lay people, maybe 3 of them, on that committee that help to give some direction to that and some priorities. And my opinion would be, you wouldn't have 3 pharmacists, you won't have 3 ranchers or 3 dentists, that you should have different people on it at perhaps different ages. We all have different needs, and to perhaps, you know, approach it that way. Another question that I have maybe for Mr. Heimbigner is, we arbitrarily used $50,000 as the cutoff. How many projects do we have that are 40,000? If we had 10 40,000 projects, that's significant. If there's 2 of them, it's not a big deal. I don't want to count paper clips, that's a waste of time. But if it is a big deal, how do we strategically decide whether we're going to move a building? I really want to be clear that I don't want to spend $110,000 on a building over here only to move it the other end of town 14 months later. And who gets to decide which department goes first? And then do we get into a jealousy thing? Well, they got to move to the new place, why don't we get to move? I can hear it now. How do we decide that issue? Who gets the priority based upon what? That's where you kind of get back to the scoring business. Again, back to Mr. Hammond's idea about the energy cost savings. If this department goes first, we save X amount of dollars in energy. If that guy goes first, we save nothing. So that needs to be, incorporated into the scoring. I don't know if there should be a big category list and a small category list. I would call a small category list might be 25,000 to 50,000, and maybe it's a little less to script. But again, if you have a whole bunch of $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 projects, then that's become a big deal. I don't want to see a lot of overlapping of lists, but how do we know which one's the master? How do we know which one's more important? When there's a lot of, I get that this is complicated, that there's a lot of moving gears to the whole thing, but just listening to discussion here just a minute ago about various people that they might move, well, we might buy this building, there has to be some kind of plan that comes up and decides that first. So, to me, just in this discussion here, deciding about the BLM building and whether or not we buy it, whether we lease it or whatever, is a really important piece to that puzzle. That would be a high priority, partly because it's a 6-month thing, as you just pointed out. And, your brother works for the bank, who gives a sweet deal, right?
Charge you double. You don't know my brother.
Those dang bankers. I thought for sure he'd give us.
He's only in the ag land.
I'm sure he'll bend the rule for us.
Well, Jim, I'm myself am quite aware that BLM building is the pivotal piece for us.
Yeah, and the other thing is I don't see interest rates going down from here. We're gonna be borrowing money, it should be soon, I'm thinking. We hate to borrow money, right? But if that's a reasonable thing to do, borrowing now compared to probably 2 years from now might be significantly different in terms of interest. We can never predict about all of that stuff, so. Anyway, so those are my major thoughts, but I'm not sure how complete this list is at the end. I'd like to see it complete. And the other thing is I think there needs to be what I would call a wish list. A wish list would be those things that, if we really had the money and we had the grant, would we build a pool? Or would we build a community center? Or whatever it is. We build a meeting hall that, I went to this disaster preparedness conference the other day, and there were a lot of people there, but that number of people sort of shows you the shortfalls of that building. Lack of bathrooms, all of that sort of stuff. So, would we rather have a building like that? Would we rather have a performing arts building in town? I don't know. People have to come up with those kind of decisions, but I think that there ought to be a wish list, and the wish list is, it's not happening next month or next year, but maybe 5 years from now, we would consider doing such and such. And it's really not part of a capital improvement plan, but when I see all the dollar signs to this, I can't help but think, how are we gonna pay for stuff? And I don't see that business revenues are getting way, way better in Lassen County. And what kinds of things are we gonna do to increase income in Lassen County to help pay for things in the future? Salaries aren't going up, pensions aren't, not gonna be cheaper, etc. So is that part of a strategic plan? Anyway, those are just my thoughts. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes,
I just would like to comment, and I'd like to say thank you, Mr. Hodge. I think you raised a number of key points and good points, and there are points that have been raised numerous times over the years. ultimately who gets to set the priority is, and I guess the ultimate scoring committee is this board, because the buck stops here in terms of allocating in the budget. So how, you know, the departments and everybody with their wish lists and wants and demands, and I think a lot of what you described needs to be done, happens, or should happen, and does happen during the formulation of the budget and the, when we get into the public works section of the budget. I mean, you can have all the wish lists and what we need to do, and, you know, the building down there is a lot better shape than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago,
That it
20
is.
years ago.
That it is.
We've been working on it for 20 years, and you'll be interested in knowing that the priorities have been set and the funding streams have been lined up, and the entrance is going to be improved for ADA purposes, and there's plans to install some restrooms on the main floor, because that's been identified by the task force working on that building for 20 years now, that as a priority, if we're going to make that building be the functional center that it was serving, you know, the other day for that meeting, those are the things that have to be done. I sat there all day, as you did, and it was pretty hot and sweltering in there.
It was.
And having attended a number of community events there, performances and stuff, everybody has one thing in common: can we get some air conditioning? I said, yeah, we can get some air conditioning after we get the ADA ramp installed and get the bathrooms in place. And so those are part of the wish list, but when it comes to allocating the resources, that's going to be done through the budget. And so really, a lot of what you described, you know, I think is what takes place during that process. And so I think, you know, over the years, the bureaucracy and the board and the few people who show up for those meetings participate in those discussions, and it would be nice, and, you know, when we have those, to expand the setting. And I think, you know, the community as a whole have the opportunity to help guide what that, you know, outcome will be. But that's where ultimately it's going to take place in terms of setting the priorities. I think what Mr. Egan is trying to do, and I think what the board is looking to Mr. Egan to do, is to kind of line up, you know, in terms of what would be the best order, where would be the efficiencies would be, to try to transition to, you know, improved facilities across the board. So I think this board is going to be looking for recommendations, and those are going to be done in an open session, so they'll be vetted with the public. So anybody and everybody who has an interest in it, whether it's the energy contractors or, you know, the consumers and users of the programs in the buildings, or just general citizens at large that want to come in and say, well, if you do this versus that, you're going to cut down the time and you're going to save this cost. All those things I think are going to be pertinent in what the board is going to be tuning into, listening. But when it's all said and done with, the board's going to have to adopt what that final action is and get the ball rolling. The problem is that over the last few years, I would say at least in the last 2 to 3 years, more so than in the past, we have focused so much on process that we forget about getting the job done. And I think one of the frustrations I see, we've lost a lot of time and opportunity to, you know, to make some significant improvements that are long overdue in this community. And so if nothing else, what I like to see us try to achieve during this fiscal year between now and June 30th is a significant use of some of the funds that we have available to fund, as in the plan that we already have in the budget now, to get that, as much of that as complete as possible. And I think Mr. Egan has got, you know, the great opportunity before him, you know, grabbing the bull by the horns, to, so to speak, to really move us forward, and maybe over the next 2 to 5 years see us, you know, achieve some of the gains that we've been talking about now for a period of time. So if we can move away from process and get into, you know, hands-on actually doing it. The terminology I used growing up was talk, 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 when are we going to eat? I'm tired of talking, I'm ready to eat. I want to see something done. And I think that's really what the board has got to struggle to do. And I think we're real close to having the threshold. I think if we could have some support and unanimity amongst the departments and the staff and the community and everybody who's got a vested interest here. Well, one thing, going and borrowing money is fine, but I think before we go borrow money, we should take an assessment of what monies we have available in our accounts today, because I don't think, if we've got some dollars that are unallocated and are not being committed and used, you know, that those dollars need to be used first. And we do have some, I think, some monies available within, we've got, you know, a few $1 million in unbudgeted resources right now. And I think some of them are committed, some of them have some strings attached that can't be used, but if it ties to one of the programs, if it's road funds that can only be used for road purposes, but part of the piece is, improving the physical outlay, for the road department to function. And obviously those funds, could be considered for that. I mean, so you have to look at all those angles and pieces, and that's really what Mr. Egan is gonna have to do, working with his staff in terms of analyzing all those lakes. And when it's all said and done with, what is not covered by some existing resource, that's when we need to be talking about how we can bundle it together and maybe do some financing for it. But I'm with you. The interest rates aren't going to go down, and the sooner we can get that moving now, the better the cost is going to be for us if we have to use that as a vehicle to implement this. So hopefully before we're all said and done, we're going to have facilities and buildings where the bathrooms are up to speed, where the ADA accessibility is there. That's going to, if you're going to use the historic courthouse, which needs to be made over, it's going to include finding and putting in an elevator to serve all those floors, because you can't use those other floors without it now. I mean, I think we have that obligation to that part of the community to make that accessibility there. Parking is always an issue. There's land unavailable in and around the Vets building there, which I think, at some point in time, if we don't take action to secure some of that property from the owners that have it available, for sale, and somebody else comes in there and shuts us off, that makes a big difference. Those are the kind of things that have to be thought about, and it's like a three-dimensional chess game that we're playing, or multi-dimensional, because it's more than three levels, and you have to be able to drill through and connect all those kind of dots on various planes.
So I get that. My point is just that we don't want to go through all those mental gymnastics and do that project only to turn and move 14 months later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I totally, and I
Yeah.
think the board totally is there too. We're gonna see where that end result is. If, in other words, if that's the only way we can get there, then obviously we have to look at doing that. Now, we've got facilities here that are being used that could be used as transitional facilities, because if you're gonna remodel the courthouse, I can tell you right now, all experiences have been, is we're gonna have to temporarily move people out of the courthouse, even the people who are gonna stay there, because you've got asbestos removal, you've got rewiring to do, you've got replumbing to do, you've got heating, HVAC stuff to deal with. I mean, there's a lot of those kind of factors, but you can't do that while people are in the middle of trying to work. So every project, wherever you go, if you're going to be remodeling, even if you go to a new building that you're going to be remodeling to move into, you've got to get that done without the people working there. So there is going to be a certain amount of displacement that you're going to have to deal with. Just the earthquake improvements to the courthouse itself, the old historic courthouse, is going to require that you're going to have to take all the tile work off the outside and re-cement it and pin it to the building. You've got to put in some shear walls. I mean, there's a number of those kind of things that will take some time. So at a most, you're going to have to look at temporary facilities for about 6 months. And if you have some facilities in the mix like this building is, it could become that temporary facility. When the sheriff's department was being built and they moved out of, well, we had to vacate the lower floor of the courthouse with the courts, remember, with the mold and those issues about 10, 12 years ago. And it required, creating temporary facilities for them. So that will happen regardless. But you don't want to repeat that so often that it becomes too laborious.
Yes. The last question. Just a minute ago, you mentioned about some things being done first at the Vets Hall. And I'm just using this as an example, okay? How does the public know that? How does the public know about those? We've got ABC lined up as our current
Well, it's been
on-task thing.
It's been part of the regular budget discussions for the last several years, plus it's also been part of the monthly, or every other month is when the Veterans Task Force, Memorial Task Force meets. Those are public meetings, and it's been really the focus of their business for the last 20 years in terms of how all those things have been formulated. So there's been a fair amount of discussion, and if somebody is interested in what those issues are, by attending those meetings and participating in those meetings and being part of that process, you could develop that. I mean, it's not something that's done behind closed doors, and it's been ongoing. It's not something that just happened in the last 3 months.
No, I get that. I'm just trying, on a readily available way, how does the public know that? So
Well,
unless they attended those meetings, or unless they read the entire budget, they don't know
Well,
that.
I would say from those meetings, I make a practice of reporting back to this board, and it may or may not make it into a news story. And every time I'm at a function down there and I have, constituents and others come up to me and
I'm not-
express to me at the meetings
Yeah.
in the building about the limitations of the building, I make an
I'm not-
effort to
I'm
ensure
not-
that information.
I'm not zeroing in the veterans building as I'm zeroing in on the process of how the public knows that we're spending our money here first and here second.
Well, I think
here
if
third.
people have that concern, and people do, and some people do, other people would care less, but some people do, I think the processes that are already in place are something that would behoove that individual to become engaged in. So, become familiar with those existing processes, and I think you can benefit a lot by learning what is being decided and what is being done on an ongoing basis.
All right, thank you.
And maybe get to add to that, Jim, I mean, we got, the coordination committee, I met last night. A lot of people come, public people do, and if they come, they know, if they don't know. You get Transportation Commission, you got Solid Waste, you got all these different committees we sit on, and, I mean, the agendas are put out, they're open to the public, but very few people care to spend their time coming to these meetings. And I don't know how to make it any more transparent.
You have to work to educate yourself. I mean, you're doing that by being here, and that's commendable.
Is it, is that information readily available on the Lassen County website?
So he's been getting
Each committee that the board's involved in?
I don't know the
Is
answer.
that the question?
Well, I can tell you that it's not.
Well, Transportation Commission, Solid Waste, I would say no.
No.
It's, there's a lot of things that are hard to find on the website. I mean, just the way that the agendas are lined up, they go reverse order. They don't go from bottom to
The
top, they go
website's
top
not
to
even
bottom. But
Hopefully
the,
that's gonna change very.
that's, that's, my point was that, is it,
You're correct,
It's a-
it's not easy to, I mean, for me, who is not a computer person, I had to find it for me. I mean,
yeah.
it's not easy to follow, I don't think, but I don't,
But a lot of the minutes and of the various meetings that the board members go to is included in the Board of Supervisors agenda and is available under correspondence. from the
Right,
board.
but if you do a word search for one of those committees, it's unlikely you're gonna get that,
that's right.
okay? That's
You're right.
part of my point, is, everybody, the committee at large, and not everybody, as he well points out, a lot of people give a flying fig. There are a lot of business people that would prefer to be here, but they're working 9 to 5, or moms are taking kids to school and they're dropping them off, right? They're not here. That's a complaint that I would have about the pool committee meetings, that lots of times, those are at times when people can't go. So how do you get the input? How do you get the input from the people who probably really want to know? But anyway, I mean, people are just interested in accountability and transparency and, all those kind of things. That, the phrase that just keeps going over and over and over, and I'm not trying to beat that to death. But in today's information society, it would be nice to have the, keyword search that works really well. I was on Lake Tahoe Community College website yesterday looking for a particular dean's name, could not find it. I spent a half an hour trying to find that, could not find it. So anyway, I'd be
First of all, the JPA, did the not really county fund.
Well, I mean, as an example of the pool committee, it meets and it has minutes, and if you go to the city website, it's not necessarily on the county website, because the city staff is the one that provides staffing to that body, and those minutes are published through their website. So there are minutes of these various bodies, and that may be something, Mr. Egan, I think it'd be worthwhile. I mean, I attended the PSA2 meeting in Wairika yesterday. There's minutes that will pertain to that meeting, and we had a very significant discussion that has financial ramifications to this county and the other 4 counties. And how does that information filter back? It filters back because we come back and make a report. If you're not here to hear the report, obviously you're going to be at a disadvantage, and you weren't here this morning. But the thing is business is ongoing, okay? At some point, yeah, if there's a magic way to capture the institutional memory of each one of us as we travel around taking care of doing our job and quantifying that in a location where you can go and search and do all that. If there's a way to do that, I would say that'd be great, but I have yet to see that in 40 years of my involvement. And I'd be more than happy to. I realize that I talk too much to suit some people. I know Eileen has a particular issue about that. But when you've got some free time and I've got some free time, I'd be happy to sit down with you. Maybe we can have a glass of beer or something at the Ale Works, and I'd be more than happy to debrief you. And I could give you so much information that before too long you'd be saying, get me out of here, I gotta leave. I can't handle any more of that.
You need to go to Lumberjacks and we get breakfast, lunch.
It may take you that long to get your breakfast. And I'd rather have a beer. But anyway, the only way you could really opposite that is, shadow a board member and spend time and go to all the meetings and that's, we're the elected representatives. That's our job to go do that, to try to conduct that business. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to try to figure out how we can take, all this information and get it down to a page like this with 3 or 4 sentences and summarize what it is that we learn. Now, I don't know, that's the success